a short introduction to understanding the world. It's a distillation of my experiences in the policy business and how you change the world. And there's just 2 slides. A lot of people think that all we got to do is get governments to fix this whole climate change business. Just do it. Change the law and fix it all up. It's not quite as easy as that. So let me go through the way the governance system works. It's not just government, but government plays a big part. This is the policy system, I've called it, and this is the direct way in which policy gets changed. There are a whole range of players in the policy club who are seeking to intervene and change something, whether it's reducing carbon, creating greater energy efficiency, bringing in renewables, all the good things that we want done. And in the end, you may need a law changed to do this. And Parliament, if you look at the way they operate, changes about 20 laws a year. Big laws. There's lots of little laws that are changed and upgraded and regulations changed and so on, but about 20 a year, and that's what Parliaments meet to do. Cabinet recommends the law changes to Parliament, but they do a lot of other changes as well. They can make a decision on building a new railway line or setting up a new regulation for feedback tariffs, or all of the things that we in fact deal with. Mostly they go through Cabinet. They don't necessarily need a law change, and they do about 20 a week. I've been in the Cabinet office. You go through their agendas and there's about 20 major decisions they make every Monday morning. So there's not any legal requirement to change that, to get those things done. And how do you get things through Cabinet? There's a whole public service process to do that, and another process that links in through the side, and I'll explain that in a minute. There's a Cabinet Policy Secretariat who think they control things, but in reality they're just shuffling around paper before it goes to Cabinet, and there's not a lot they can do to create policy through that process. In fact, individual ministers create policy, and they have advisors and media people who have lots of views about how the system should change, and the media feed in every day what people are thinking about particular issues. But the Minister is making a whole lot of decisions, and the Minister for Energy, the Minister for Climate Change, the Minister for Housing, the Minister for Transport are all making decisions every day which could impact quite heavily on climate change. So about 20 a day decisions are being made by those individual ministers. And the material, the information for that is coming in from various sources. The public service is set up to provide that daily advice to ministers, and the officers get ministerials which require an answer immediately, and they are constantly working on feeding stuff to their minister. They have policy sections, and within that, probably the biggest factor, and often the biggest barrier to it all, is Treasury. Treasury sits there constantly saying no, because it'll cost money. And every bit of advice as it filters through that system has a Treasury input to it. And they get a very big input into that too. They say yes or no to that final Cabinet stage. But feeding into this process is not just the public service. There are also consultants and experts. The Minister can call for a consultant's report, and that can feed directly into there, and they can just bypass the public service. That's what happened on the train issues that I got involved in. In many ways, the key pieces of advice came to the Minister as a consultant's report. The public service were just not equipped to actually plan a new railway. They, for years, had been thinking there wasn't a future for railways. And that's in many ways the climate change stuff. Most wicked problems, most difficult ones, most things to do with major transitions, they require some outside thinking. So consultants play a very important role in government, and they feed in. And occasionally there are experts who are on the payroll just to feed in new ideas. And I think they're very important because the public service basically want to keep things as they are. That's their job. That's the way they see their job anyway. Then there are lobby groups, and the lobby groups can be from every possible area, and they're set up with full-time lobbyists, whether they're from the pastoralists and graziers or the Housing Industry Association or the RAC, Royal Automobile Club. These groups have full-time people whose idea is to feed directly to ministers, and they take them out to dinner. They constantly feed material in. Good ministers are not affected by that. Most ministers are. It's a difficult process to not see these constant barraging people as important. And when Kevin Rudd decided to take out the climate change bill suddenly, it was quite clearly traced back to the coal lobby who'd been badgering away at him and saying, you're going to destroy the economy and so on. And the mining industry, of course, are the most powerful lobby around, and they rolled out their big guns when the mining tax was introduced and sunk it. They can do very effective lobbying, not just because of the power of their arguments, the power of their media influence. They can run $50 million media campaigns in no time and bring governments down. So these lobby groups have their own policy committees and boardrooms, and local groups and individuals can feed into them. The RAC are constantly surveying their members, and that process feeds in through there. The local groups and individuals tend to think their way into the decision making is through the public service process, whether it's through the town planning schemes and local government and some democratic process, or just ringing up a minister. They feed in through here. But there's another process again, the backbenchers and party machines. They are creating policy all the time. Each parliament, each party, whether it's Liberals, Labor, Greens, or Independents, have their own policy making processes. And they have branches, local branches, they have policy committees, they have unions, they have different groups that feed in there, and clearly the lobbyists know that as well, and they feed in through that process. And each backbencher also have their own electorate office, and out there they're getting information on a daily basis about what needs to be changed. And you can feed in through that up to the backbenchers, and they feed into individual ministers. But there's a dotted line here, the inner circle. Every government has a group of people who are the key trusted advisors, and they've earned their position there because they were close to the key politicians in this cabinet. Now that inner circle is very powerful. Most governments, you find out who that inner circle is if you really want to change things, and you make sure you go through them as well as these processes. Now, I've certainly got most of my stuff done by knowing who that inner circle is. They are very keyed in to advice of a political nature. They will always ask, what's this going to do in terms of the electorate, especially in marginal seats? They constantly think about marginal seats. So they've got a map there, a geographic map, and they say, well, what's this policy going to do? You mean you want to go out there? Now, if you went out that way, there are two marginal seats that will benefit from it, and they will clearly, that will swing the government. So you need to understand marginal seats and politics if you want to go through the inner circle. If you talk that language to them, they will definitely help you. If you just want to talk rationality, climate change is a bad thing, they'll say, which marginal seats are going to be the first to be affected by climate change. So that's understanding the policy system and knowing there are various ways in through the system. This is pretty much the same in any system in the world, whether it's a non-democratic process or a democratic one, and clearly different pathways to change are there. But I think getting into that process and individual ministers, having someone who will lead it through the system is a very important one. But don't forget the power of the inner circle. Okay, now there's an indirect process that's going on as well. The indirect process is how you change the general culture. So when the inner circle go out and survey the electorate and ask them questions, and they say, we want a train, or we want renewable energy, then that culture has been changed, and they respond to the politics of that. So getting the right numbers to bring about that change and say, look, 60% of people are now saying this is important. That is the way in which change happens mostly. So cultural policy is really about what is possible, right, acceptable, what ought to be done. But that depends on what people think. And they are influenced by a series of things. They're influenced by the media, and the media can run campaigns and change what people think. Sometimes those campaigns don't work, and because people are not that silly, and ideas do matter. So writers, academics, churches, they influence ideas. They change the culture by helping people to understand what the issues are. So universities play a big part in this cultural policy. Technology, just the presence of different technologies changes the way we think and the way policies work. So suddenly, if there's an app available on a mobile phone that can enable people to use public transport easier, the idea of public transport or monitoring and managing your renewable energy system through some kind of app, that makes it very much easier to adopt. And of course the educational process, so changing people through the longer term processes of schools and universities and trainings, TAFEs and professional training. This all is a very important feed-in. So the way people think influences the policy system. Then you have to think about getting something through. If it's the right thing to do, you've still got to get up and over a hurdle where policies become practicable and achievable. If you have a policy which is that people should get out of cars, that's pretty impractical and largely symbolic until you overcome a series of key obstacles and hurdles. And in most areas of decarbonising and creating a more climate sensitive future, we have to overcome each of these hurdles. You've got to get the economics right. Why is it better to get out of cars, or why is it better to use solar energy? And you've got to have a good analysis of that. Then it's got to be right. What's the environmental aspects, the social justice aspects, the perceived morality of this? And I think there is a very heavy element now, which has come through cultural change, that responding to climate change is the right thing to do. So it's not just the economics, it's got to be right. Then there's the legal process. Okay, is it legal? Do you have to change laws to do it? What are the regulations? What are the barriers that are there, which are purely simple rules that are getting in the way? There's so many town planning rules that make it very, very hard to bring about the kind of changes we're constantly pushing for. So you have to look at the legals. The policy process. Will it support the kind of statutory policy that's needed? I think that's what it says. And has it gone through the right process? There will even, you can get the economics, the morality, the legals right, and if it hasn't actually been properly processed, people get nervous. And so going through that previous direct process, you still need to do it. So you don't just make an announcement. When governments make an announcement and it hasn't been processed properly, people get worried about it. And then finally the politics. You've got to win the votes. There's no point in taking something to Cabinet if you don't win the votes. There's a famous story of the basics regulatory system which we were processing through. Everybody supported it. At the very last minute, the Housing Industry Association opposed it through the lobbying process. Went to a different minister than the Housing Minister, and at Cabinet it got rolled. They didn't get the numbers. Now, it was economically very sensible. It was right. We were responding to how you can save money in the home as well as saving the planet. It was legal. It had been through the policy process. They didn't get the numbers. And we still don't have the numbers to do that. So it's sitting there. And the questions they ask in politics to get those numbers are, will it get a run in the media? Will it help their friends? Or will it actually make it worse? Will it get through Parliament? And the biggest question of all is the first one, will it win votes? The numbers in Cabinet are always asking that. So there's big hurdles to get through, but you can do it, and when you do, everything just rolls out and no one looks back. It's get on to the next issue, and the policies are then practicable and achievable, and you start changing the world.